I think Haydn said it all in a way. That's also why we invited him to summarize. But just to sum up on today, we started out today presenting some of the key findings from the 2-year program, the 2-year journey that you all been on here. That we had a feeling 2 years ago that something was changing. We didn't know what, so we asked the question: why is Company A doing different from Company B in the different Nordic countries? And Hans Christian, he gave us the backdrop to this discussion, saying that this something what is happening is actually there's a speed of change. Something is, even within manufacturing, maybe it's coming back. Showed the example of the digital printing. We had some speakers from Berkeley a couple of months ago who said it's all algorithm-driven economy, essentially. We're not going to that discussion, but certainly some aspects to this. And now we learned that business model innovation is already outdated before we even have grasped what it's all about. But we had also 3 great companies in the panel 1 that told us how their journey had been working with the MMI program. And what I think is really optimistic key pointers from that first panel is that, yeah, it was stuck maybe in product and process at 2 years ago to begin with. We've also learned that they all now have focused their attention towards 2 new dimensions of the business system called the innovation radar. And that is partnership was one of the keywords, and customer experience and communication. These are actually areas that Haydn just elaborated and highlighted. So I think if we take this as a sign that in getting from A to B, understanding the problem is maybe one of the most important things. And I think we all have, in this journey, realized that the problem is that we cannot no longer just stay in the product process. Everybody is aware of this, even if it shows in this report that I think you all will read when you have it. If you haven't read it, you can do it in the flight home. So this is maybe the best thing, that we understand that this is no longer a feasible approach. We also had, as a summarizing from the consultants of the MMI program, Christian gave us a good introduction to why culture matters. It's been one of the things that have been discussed today as well, also in the coffee breaks. Culture, it's really about culture. And I think this is an important thing about the MMI program, that when we started out, there was discussion, should we just have as much statistics as possible? Should we have 500 companies instead of 100? Then we could run more statistics. But I also think that the message from both the consultants side and from the company is, if they hadn't had the deep dive workshops and the discussions, the face-to-face interactions, they wouldn't have taken this ownership of working systematically with how to change focus and effort within innovation. And we learned from the second company panel that we have small companies that are actually ready to totally transform their business model. Symphonical mentioned that they came in and they realized they couldn't scale. Maybe that's totally irrelevant. We just learned here. But anyway, Symphonical decided to go for the networked economy and say, we need to use a different business model. And they could use the framework for that stepping stone. At the other end of the spectrum, I think a company like ISS, 550,000 employees, shows the velocity or the strength of having this new way of at least working from where we stand with these 100 companies or 70 companies that's been through this journey of MMI program. And that is, you can actually take a small company like Symphonical, start up and make a meaningful exercise with this way of working, as well as for a company that is global like ISS with 550,000. And I think that's great insight from this exercise we've been through together. I also think that the whole discussion about iterations, the deep dive workshops, as Christian mentioned, that if we hadn't had them, it would have been kind of falling on the floor. And I'm not sure we've been here today if we just had been running that. And that's one of the things we will take back and discuss with our stakeholders from Vinnova, Tekes, and innovation agencies in the Nordics. What does these findings mean? And Christian said, coming back to culture, we have another joke internally in the Nordic system that basically on a short formal, you can define Nordic business as manufactured by the Swedes, designed by the Finns, sold by the Danes to the Norwegians, and the Norwegians will tell the Icelandic that they invented it. Just take a look at the paperclip story. Hayden summed it literally hitting the nail, so to speak, for all today's discussion, but also the last 2 years. It is about partnership, and it is about increased focus on customer experience. But maybe the key word is ecosystems, the capabilities and learning how to work in these systems. And thinking about management guru Peter Drucker said already 30 years ago that there are basically two functions of a company. There's the front office and the back office. And any company should focus on outsourcing as much from the back office as possible and focus on what it's doing externally. Maybe that's an easy formula to remember in this journey forward for the companies. And I think that there's a tendency also to, in especially times of crisis or when it's turbulence, like we learned, that you would feed the problems and starve the opportunities. This is human nature. So maybe think about this as one of the key things too. Are we feeding the problems and starving the opportunities the way we work with innovation in our companies? And just to round all this up, we have large public sectors too in the Nordics. And Baumol, the economist, said something 30 years ago. Service economy is the sinkhole of the economy. It can never be productive. It will always take out the productivity of the manufacturing sector. What we learned in the 1980s and 1990s was that the IT revolution actually meant that the private service sector economy, this layer that Hayden talked about, was actually increasing the productivity of companies like we have Apple and Google and Amazon, but a lot of other companies like your own companies today. And I think the big challenge for the future, also especially in the Nordic countries, because we have these large public sectors, is how do we get the public sector to be more productive with these new insights? Because it has to paraphrase Baumol, maybe the public sector has become the sinkhole of the economy. That's why we are converging in Europe so fast towards what we thought was unrealistic, but just 5 years ago. And unless we solve that problem. So these problems and questions about ecosystems, how we get productivity back, and how we work differently. Geese, they actually, when they fly 10,000 kilometers, they change leadership. They know that one goose cannot do all the leadership all the way. So maybe we need to experiment more with how we, as humans, do leadership and management. Switzerland is a great country in many ways, and they change their leadership every second year president. So maybe this 5, 10, 15 years leadership is just part of the problem as well in the way we discuss innovation and these things. So just to recap on this, it's ecosystem, so to speak, stupid, like Clinton would have said maybe. And it's about experimentation, about building up capabilities inside the companies. And I think we have, with this 2 years MMI program, set the path for at least a meaningful discussion. Maybe even business model is a bit stuck in the old paradigm. But at least we know where the problem is, and we know which direction to look at a higher level than we did 2 years ago. So with this, I would like to say thanks on behalf of Nordic Innovation to all participants in today's program, and looking forward to see you in other settings in the future, hopefully.